Hello, it's Diane here. I've been given the opportunity by Diane to make a tutorial for this fantastic wallet. It's the Flip Clutch Wallet by Spencer Ogg Sewing Patterns. When Diane created this, she wasn't making tutorials at the time, and she didn't get around to making the tutorial for this, and she's just so busy now. She asked if I'd like to do it, and I jumped at the chance. I loved making this pattern. I've made quite a few of them, and this is one I just made this weekend. I made it easily within the day, and you open it up on a magnetic clasp, and it doesn't flop open because you've got the magnetic clasps holding it together. So initially you've got your zip pocket. Close that back up. You've got your zip pocket, which I hold change in, and then at the back, handy little pocket for your mobile phone, and it protects it. Then you open it up, you've got your card holders and a place for your notes, front and back. I made this using cotton. You could use vinyl, leather, cork. It really is a lovely choice of fabrics that you have on making this. I set my magnetic snaps slightly higher because I like to allow for the added bulk. If my phone was a bit higher, etc., you can set it a bit lower if you want to, but it's entirely up to you. It comes with two patterns for the flap. You've got this style, which I use this template with, or this style, which is a nice pointed one, and with that you can use the added hardware that you can buy, and that's what I'm doing with this one. So I think we shall crack on with the tutorial. I hope you enjoy it. Not quite as professionally made as Diane, but hopefully you'll understand it as well as we do Diane's. So to begin with, we want our two flap pieces, and one doesn't have any interfacing fused to it and one side does. Also, with all the interface pieces, trim the interfacing down by 3/8 of an inch all the way around, and this will help reduce the bulk in the seams. On this one, I forgot to do it, so it did get a little bit bulky. So do try to remember to just reduce the interfacing. And I fused all my interfacing to all the pieces, apart from the credit card pockets. I didn't fuse the interface into the credit card pockets, and I haven't fused obviously the Decoville anywhere. So we've got our flap pieces, and we've got the one piece which has the interfacing on, and the one piece that's going to have the Decoville, and this is Decoville heavy. So if you've got a print that's a directional print, make sure that you've got them correct. So the outer piece will have the Decoville added, so you want it to be that way. So say for example, if you've got a person, then the head's going to be there and the legs there. Then for the lining piece you need the opposite, so you need it to be upside down basically, and that's the one with the interfacing on. And we want to add the magnetic snap, and I've cut a hole in the pattern piece just so that it allows me to place some Decoville light over the centre, over that dot, and fuse it in place, and this will help keep the magnetic snap feeling nice underneath. You don't feel the prongs poking through, and it will just strengthen the slot. So I've done that. Just give it a quick cool down, because if I go and mark my lines, I'll immediately lose the lines because it's a heat pen. So get the pattern piece again, mark the dot, get the washer. I should mention as well, the pattern says to use 15mm magnetic snaps, which I did do with the first one, but I've decided on this one I'm going to use 18mm on the flap and 15mm inside, because I'm using this piece of hardware. It's going to sit slightly proud, so I just wanted the slightly larger magnetic snap, but that's not a requirement. If you want to stick to the pattern, please do. I'm sure it works fine, but I've got a lot more 18mm magnetic snaps than 15mm, so that's another reason for using it. I like to use the thinner ones. So that's the holes made, and now I get the male part of the snap, and that's the thinner piece with the protruding part in the middle, and pop that into the slots. And I'm an outie girl. Some fold inwards, some fold outwards. I find that they sit much nicer when they're, and flatter when they're pushing outwards. I'm just going to do that off screen because I'm on the mat, my ironing mat. It's a bit soft. So that's the snap added on this piece. Then we get the piece that doesn't have any interfacing, and then we get our Decoville heavy, and we want to line up along the top here, just looking for the shiny side to make sure I'm going to fuse the correct side, and we're going to line up level with the top, and then we've got the gaps all the way round. And I'm just going to just see that's slightly wobbly off. That's better. And I'm going to fuse it. Now I did struggle to get Decoville heavy, so this is buckram. I don't know if it's exactly the same as Decoville heavy, but I do like it, and it does seem to behave nicely. So if you do struggle to get Decoville heavy, you could try buckram. And really make sure that you're taking the time to fuse it, so it doesn't start coming away. That's my iron. Let me know that it's been laying down too long. Let's have a look to see how it's doing. I always check around the edges, and if it's fused around the edges, I'm happy. So that's fused nicely. And then we need to get our lining side place them right sides together. I just like to clip to hold in place. And then we take it to the machine and stitch all the way round from there all the way round to there. We do not stitch across, so leave that open, just stitch there. So once we've sewn around the edge, trim the corners and then just trim the seam allowance generally. And then turn the flap the right side out. It's quite stiff, but it will go. You just have to show it who's the boss. So that wasn't too bad. And I just want to make sure that the seam is slightly turned in on the underside so that you don't see it on the outer part. I'll show you what I mean once I've finished pressing. So you've got the flap, this is the outside, so you're looking at that. When you turn it over, you can just see the seam slightly on the edge. Well, that's what you want, so that it looks nice. Now imagine I'm going to put the hardware on later on, and that's how it's going to look, which is very pretty. And at this point, before you stitch across there, you may want to add your logo or handmade label, and I prefer to add it to the flap than the purse itself, and then I just have to decide where I'm going to place it. And a piece of loose metal there. So if I fold this back down just to get the general look of where I want it to go, so probably around there would be nice. So now all I've got to do, once I've opened these back up, is to find the central point. So that's the centre. So that looked wrong, it's because I've marked the one out on the outside and it's not, it's just there and there. So I just want to make sure that I'm dead straight. I'll get my bigger ruler for that. So I mark that line. And that lets me see where I need to mark, or cut, shall I say, sorry. And then I get my craft knife and I make sure, keeping my fingers out of the way, and that I don't want to go through to the back. So I make sure that I cut very carefully. Let's see. I always put my lid back on my knife. I learnt the hard way years ago. And then I just want to iron the marks off. There we have it. Excuse me because you can't see this part. Just press them down. So they're in there. And you can, if you want to, just add some more Decovil over there so you don't feel that, if you want to. Just checking I like that. Yes, imagine when this is on as well. That's going to look really pretty. So I'm very happy with that. So all we need to do now is just about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance or 1/8 of an inch, just stitch across the top there to close that off. I've tacked across the top there, and I've also top stitched around the edge. This isn't something you have to do, but I like to do it. Even though I'm adding the hardware, I still did top stitch around there. And that's my hardware added in place. So I'm happy with that. Now what we need to get now is our piece A, main body piece. And we place it right side up and upside down. So if it's a directional print you're using, the person's head would be here and legs there. And then we get our flap and we place that right side down, so we're looking at the magnetic clasp, and we lay that along the top edge centrally. And I just like to measure. I've got 1/4 of an inch that side and again that side, so I'm happy with where I've got it placed. And then we just want to take it to the machine and just base stitch it in place, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the top just to hold it in place. Now we get piece C, the pocket return, and we place that right side down along the edge, clip it in place, and then stitch it in place 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way along the top. So once that's stitched in place, we open that up and press it open, and then turn it over and press the main body piece down also. And we just want to tack the side pieces down about 2 inches either side, just to piece these together. And then we're going to also top stitch on the main body side all the way across. And now you should have something that looks like this. So it's top stitched along the top there and just tacked down the side by about 2 inches. Now we need piece B, phone pocket. And first of all, we've got some notches on the side here that you can cut out. And I had my snippers handy, and I just to make sure I get it accurately, oh, didn't clip it to the fabric. Just make the notch, being a bit stubborn. I think my snippers have seen better days now. Might be time to retire them. Okay. Definitely time to retire them. Still nice and sharp everywhere else, but the ends have died on me. So we've cut our notches, and then we get we lay the pocket right side up, and then we lay this on top right side up, so that the right side and then the wrong side is touching, and line up the notches like so. Then turn it over, and excuse me, you should find that it lines up with this, give or take, like literally just a few millimeters. Yeah, and then I just clip the two layers together. Don't clip that one. Take it to the machine, flip the panel so it's up, so it's just these layers, and stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once we've stitched across there, we flip the panel back down, and we just stitch along the side here at about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from here up to the notches. Don't go past the notches, and you're sewing through all the layers. Now we move over to the credit card pockets, which is pattern piece G1. Excuse me, I've cut the pattern pieces out, and then I've gone ahead and fused the interfacing. And what you do is you've cut it out, and the quick and easy way, which Diane's told us to do, is to cut 3/4 of an inch off one end, 3/4 of an inch off one side. So you're left with the smaller rectangle. And also we've got the notches again, and we need to cut them out of both pieces, and make sure that you've got the one with the one notch at the bottom when you start. I'll put that aside, and then the instructions are lovely and clear on doing this. You want to bend at the notches, at the single notch at the bottom, and take it up to the first notch it comes to. and then press it. And then we bend at the next notch up and take it up to the next notch it comes to. And then the last one is to fold at the last notch and you should find that you meet this bottom edge in doing so. Okay, so with that done, we now take it to the machine and we top stitch each folded edge. That's 3 of them. Okay, so I've top stitched along each piece. And now if you like to add your label, now's the time to do it. And you can choose where you put it. On this one I did put it centrally. And then when I came to stitching down, I moved it front and back. A bit of a palaver, but I got it done. But I'm going to lay it to one side this time. And what I've done is I've allowed for the seam allowance. I measured for the centre. Then I measured 3/8 of an inch in from the seam allowance. And then did the halfway point, roughly. I mean, it's not going to matter if it's a couple of millimetres out. Then I did 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre down from that folded edge, and I've drawn the centre line, and I just fold it in half. I've got double-sided tape on the outer edge of each side, and then I'll take it to the machine and stitch either side. And we're also just going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance down each side to fix them in place, and then we repeat for the other piece. So I'm going to go and do that, and I'll come back when both pieces are ready. Here we have both pieces, and we lay these together right sides together. And then we stitch across the bottom edges at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We open this up and we open the seam allowance and press that open. Press the top so it's nice and crisp. And now you can either fold it in half, or I like to be a lot more accurate and measure. So I measure so draw a line, and we stitch all the way from top to bottom. So we've stitched down the centre, and we now get pattern piece E. It's the credit card lining, and I've cut the notches in it that's on the pattern, But you can also fold it in half and find it that way. And then we get the credit card slots that we've prepared and line up the centre with the notches. And I just like to make sure that is straight. Yeah. And we just clip it in place. And then we're going to stitch it down the sides at about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then measure 3.6 inches in from the edge and stitch that line. So for example, I'll show you. So it's 3.6 inches from the centre line. I'm thinking this doesn't make sense, but yeah, I forgot that bit. So it's very hard to see because it's black, so that's the centre line there. 2, 4, 6. Making sure it's straight. That's it there. There. So it's 3.6 inches from the centre, not from the edge. Oh goodness me. And I'm having to manoeuvre to find the centre stitch line, which is not easy, so I apologise if my head's in the way as well. But and this line is so that we get a nice fit for the credit cards. So I'm going to take it to the machine, tack close to the edge, and then I'm going to do a stitch line where I've drawn. Now I've stitched the stitch lines, and the only thing we're left to do now here is to stitch along the centre seam to separate the pocket so that you've got two separate parts. So I shall stitch across there, and then I shall iron the ink to get rid of it. Okay, so that's that piece ready with the stitching along the centre there. And now we want to get our zip tab piece, doesn't have interfacing, and our zip. And we want to fold the tab piece in half and press it. And then fold the raw edges into the centre. Gosh, it's so hard to see in the black. Okay, and then what I like to do is get my double-sided tape, which I've currently mislaid. Ah, there it is. I knew it was somewhere. Okay. Now we get our double-sided tape. And I lay some on each side. You don't have to do this, but it keeps better control. Then we get our zip, the end that doesn't open up, so you're pulling the zip from left to right to open, and place the zip up to the folded edge, and then just stitch across here, making sure you catch the back, to stitch that onto the zip. So we've stitched across there, and we just want to trim the zip down each side so that it's level with the edge of the zip, like so. And we want to measure 6 3/4 inches, 17 centimetres, from the end here to mark a line. So I'm just turning that around, it makes it easier. So 6 3/4 inches there. Come straight down, and then I just mark a line. I use a chalk pen for this because my dissolvable ink pens don't seem to like to mark the zip. And then again from the very edge to 6 3/4 inch. And then we open up the zip. I did cut quite a long zip, to be fair. I didn't need to cut such a long one, but there you go. And where the line is, we fold it down and then bring this zip to the side. And then I get a pin and hold it in place like that. And then I'm going to take it to the machine and just stitch a line down here to keep it in place. And I'm going to do exactly the same with the opposite. Here's our zip prepared and stitched. So we just pop that there for a moment. Then we need to get our piece H, which are the pocket lining pieces that don't have any interfacing. And all you need to do is get an inch strip of interfacing and lay it along the top edge and fuse it in place. There's a slight gap at each side to allow for the seam allowance and to reduce the bulk. So they've been added, and we get our main piece, and we have the flap down knit towards us, and we need to fold this in half to find the centre. And I'm just going to snip a notch, and I'm going to do the same with the zip. I need to find the centre. And again with the pocket piece. Okay, and then we get our double-sided tape, or you can just use pins if you want to, and just lay it along the top here. Well, it's the bottom edge of the main panel, but and then trying to get the backing off. We want to lay the zip face down, and lining up with the notch, I'm going to turn it round to make it easier to see the notch. And you can stitch a 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance across there, but because I'm using double-sided tape, I'm going to go ahead, lay some more down, and then get the pocket lining piece and lay this right side down, and then stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So there's the top stitching. And now we get our credit card piece, and we want to lay it face up with the straight edge on the top, and then we get our zip and we'll turn it over so it's face down. And again, oh, I haven't yet cut a notch, so I'll just quickly do that. Makes a lot of difference to have that there. It's very easy then to make sure we get it in the right place. Some double-sided tape. I'm just going to turn it round so that I can see that I'm close to the edge. And then like so, and then you can take it to the machine and just stitch along at 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, but because I'm using double-sided tape, I'm cheating, and I'm just going to put the double-sided tape and lay the other lining pocket piece on top face down, again matching up the notch in the middle. and then stitch across the top at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we finish stitching, and then as before, open this up. Oh, hitting the lamp with my iron. I'm sorry if that was a really loud clatter in your ears. And turn over and press this. And as before, just top stitch along the top here. Okay, so I've done the top stitching there as well. And now we get the pocket pieces together. Open the zip 3/4 of the way. And I can remove the ironing pad. And we want to make sure that the seams match up. So that they look nice once turned. And then we just pin the sides. We don't need to pin the top because we're not sewing that yet. Oh, and just snip the zip. Forgot that bit. Again, matching the seams. It's really important that the seams match. Just check once I've got the pin in. And you should really find that once you've got the seams matched, your pockets end together, they match up. So if they're a little bit out, I wouldn't worry too much. Okay. And just matching up the curve. I'm actually going to, it's a bit thicker, so I'm going to just use clips here. Okay, and what we're going to do now is stitch 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from the bottom all the way up, stopping 1.5 inches before the top. So what I like to do, just to make sure I don't go further than I should, is place a mark. Make sure that was 1.5 inches. Yes. Okay, so stitch both sides from the very bottom to the marks. Once you've stitched the sides, just turn it right side out. Check everything's lining up nice and neatly and that you're happy with everything. Just give it a press. And we just turn it back inside out. I'm trying to think the best way to do this because I did it without having to bend the flap. That's it. There we go. And what we need to do now is to tuck the flap right down inside as far as you can. So once I've pushed it through so far, I put my hand up inside and making sure you haven't gone down inside the credit card slots, that you're sort of in front of them so that you can grab it. And put it in as far as you can. You want it right out of the way. And then I'm just going to pin this okay, and now we stitch from where we left off all the way around at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to the other side. Okay, so we've stitched around the top there. It's a bit tight here, but I managed it. And now we want to trim the corners quite closely, and then I just trim to around 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then come to this one again. If you prefer, you can clip notches into the curves as well, but I've cut very closely, so I shouldn't need to. And then we just give that a little press while we're here. You can see it. Turn the iron up and then turn it right sides out. So I tend to grab the flap, just makes it easier to pull everything through, like so. Push that down. And then tuck that in make sure that the pockets are sitting all the way down. Remove loose threads. And there you've got your purse or wallet almost complete. I'll just give it another press. And now, before we sew anything else, we need to add the oh goodness, what are they called? I've just realised I haven't pushed that all the way out. I thought there was something wrong. The magnetic snaps. That's better. I thought there's something wrong with that. I'm going to have to look. And then I realised that I hadn't pushed it all the way through. So, that's that. And now we're adding the magnetic snaps. I've gone ahead and I've fused Decoville Light where we're going to add the snaps. There, there, and there. And then what we need to do is measure 1/2 inch up from the edge of the zip and then in the centre. I have already gone ahead and done this. And then we get the washer, put it where we marked the dot in there, mark the lines and then cut. Now what I like to do is put a pin across the bottom of the line and then go in with the seam ripper, and when you hit the pin you can't go any further, so there's no accidental rips. I've done that in the past and ruined the project, so I don't do that anymore. So I've done that, and then we did the same up here, 1/2 inch from the edge here and marked in the centre. And oh, sending them flying. We want to put the female snap at this end. That's it. I never like to cut too big a hole, so it's usually just a bit of a fit. And then you do it blindly. And then I like to use scissors to push the prongs down because it hurts my fingers. I'm sorry you can't see what I'm doing. I can't see what I'm doing. Right, let me have a look in there. Lovely. Yeah, happy with that. Then we add the male one here. This one's easier, you can see this one. And then finally, we need to mark for the outside, and to do that, close the zip, and I just pop these together. And what I did was I marked the snap that's already installed, I just put some chalk on it. Fold this down to where I want it to go. Press. And then I had the where I wanted, checked to make sure that I was in the middle of the bag, and then did my holes as we did before, and then cut the holes and add the snap. Go, and that's all the snaps added. And what we need to do now is push the lining of the pocket right down inside. Make sure it's completely flattened out, that it's not folded up anywhere. Excuse me. Really making sure that it's neat and that it's sitting flat. Yeah. Oh, goodness me, and I forgot. We need to add our Decoville Heavy into the bag. Excuse me. I don't recommend using Decoville Light. You really need to do the heavy. That's why Diane suggests that you do this. Because it makes a difference to the bag, to the wallet. So you want to do it glue side down on the outside. So this is the glue here, and it's going to be on that side. So, goodness me, pull the pocket out again after all that. And pop this in. Obviously make sure it's the long sides, and it's getting caught on the magnetic snap. So the longer sides are going here and the shorter sides across. And just making sure it goes up to the top. If you find it's not wanting to sit flat and it's, you know, buckling or pushing up, take it out and just trim a little bit off. You wouldn't have to do much. Okay, so I'm happy with where that is. And you do have to spend a while pressing. It doesn't fuse immediately. That's always a good sign when the alarm goes off on my iron to say that it's been face down for too long. So let's have a look to see if it's fused yet. More or less just this top part here. Okay, now we pop the pockets back in, the pocket lining. Now we're going to stitch across. So first of all we stitch in the ditch, which is stitching on the seam line. Make sure your bobbin colour's the correct colour for this side as well. And then once we've stitched across here, we then stitch either side by half a centimetre, maybe 1/8 of an inch either side of the ditch, so to speak. I shall show you on here. You've got 3 rows of stitching, and that's what we're looking to do. So there's the stitching, both sides, and that's the actual wallet complete, apart from adding the hardware and making the wrist strap. So we'll move on to the wrist strap next. Now we're making the wrist strap. So we want to get our strip of fabric. The measurements are given in the pattern. I don't like to give measurements out on the videos because I feel that's giving away information on the pattern. So I've fused interfacing along the centre. Then I folded in half and pressed it, and then folded the edges in towards the centre like that. So nice and easy. And we thread a lobster clasp or a D-ring, split ring rather, onto the wrist strap, and then we make sure we don't twist it like I had then and open the ends out fully, and then stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So just stitch straight across. So we've stitched across, and this isn't in the pattern, but when I do ones like this, I like to just snip the corners. And then we finger press the seam open and then fold it in. And we take it to the machine, and we start by stitching round the open side first, and move the lobster clasp as you go. Then once you've done the open side, stitch along the folded edge. I stitched all the way around, and then at the seam I folded 3/8 of an inch, over the clasp, and you can either stitch across or, as in my case, just add a rivet. And that's the wristlet, well, wrist strap made. And the wallet here, I've added my hardware, very easy, just slot it on and do the 4 screws. I didn't show it to you because it is really so very easy. And then we get to our lobster clasp, and I can either add it to the zip pull or to the actual pull part or the main body of the zip. And there we go, she says. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Do take a look at Diane's website with all her patterns. I don't think there's a pattern I've ever made that I didn't enjoy making, and they are all very clear and easy to understand. Her video tutorials are amazing. I love watching them, and so do take a look at her YouTube channel. I'll be putting links to her YouTube channel and her website down below in the description of this video. Do please click subscribe on Diane's tutorial YouTube and mine, so that you don't miss future tutorials. And if you're in Diane's group or my group, Bag Making Addicts, please do post your lovely wallets when you make them. Enjoy making yours. Happy stitching. Bye.